I know it's crazy, but it
You're
seems
watching
so
Channel Z, the
logical.
world's leading
Try to
zombie
fight
apocalypse
it,
channel.
but it's something
Broadcasting live
psychological.
from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Hello. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on this planet. Welcome to Zombie History, where we explore the buried past. Hope you're ready to unearth some history with us today. I'm here. I'm your host, Dr. Mzilikazi and I'm super excited to be here with my co-host, Liz Grumbach. Hey, Liz, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you, Dr. Kone?
I'm excellent, Liz. Good to see you. Things
So good
going
to
all
see you.
right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm somehow surviving the apocalypse so far. It's getting real
Good.
hot here in Phoenix, so we'll see. We'll see what's up. How about you?
The same. I'm realizing that surviving the apocalypse is truly a day by day thing, and
Yeah.
certainly an hour by hour thing
Oh,
at times. You know.
absolutely. Well, if y'all are watching in the live chat, tell us how you're surviving the apocalypse right now. But Ms. Elkazi, what undead stories are we focusing on for today's episode?
Wow. Well, we actually have some really cool stories to really engage with. Particularly thinking about, um, well, we had a lot of religious and spiritual holidays over this weekend in 2022, and
Mhm.
we can unpack those. So, for example, something that's very unique, does not happen often, is that it was Easter Sunday yesterday. It was Passover this weekend.
Mhm.
We're in the month of Ramadan.
Mhm.
And I also learned about a new, well, it's not new, it's new to me. I learned about a holiday called Vaisakhi, which is celebrated in northern India by Hindus, Sikhs, and some Muslims. So really, this moment, this moment here in
Mhm.
April 2022, with the intersection of all of these major faiths around the planet.
Mhm.
And some major holidays, and in particular, we're going to focus on this on
Yeah.
Easter, and in
Mhm.
particular, the story of Easter is within the kind of the raising of Jesus. And truly,
Mhm.
when you think about that story, you think, wow, is Jesus the OG zombie? And
Yeah.
OG, for all of you out there who don't know, that's the original gangster. Is he the OG zombie that we ought to be talking about here on the ZAM channel?
I know, and Pamela's already in the comments saying, "Can't wait to understand more about the rising of Jesus." Because, like, yeah, I think Jesus is a zombie, right, Ms. Lakazi? I'm pretty sure.
Well, I mean, there's this whole thing with Jesus's death, right? And Jesus
Hmm.
is buried in the tomb. And is it, what is it, 3 days later?
Yeah,
Comes out.
yeah. And there's this whole like zombie, is it a resurrection? What is a resurrection, right? Like as someone that grew up Catholic, I grew up listening to a lot of sermons about what resurrection means. We could talk about that a little bit. But I know there's another thing that we maybe want to chat about too, which is this being zombified by the idea of Jesus or Christianity or a religion itself, right? So
Yeah.
there's this like historical and political conversation. Should we start that?
Well, here on Zombie History, that's what we want to unpack. So yeah,
Yeah.
of course. What are the political, historical implications of being zombified
Mhm.
by Jesus? Well,
Mhm.
some of those implications, as we know, and as we've covered on this show before, we could think about uh, the role of religion um, as a tool of oppression, right? The way, in
Mhm.
particular, religion was used throughout the transatlantic slave trade, or the forced conversion of different people through these colonial encounters, right? So,
Mhm.
really thinking of the ways in which the idea, we won't say Jesus himself, right, but the ideas that surround the development of the system of religion were used to really truly zombify people, right? You
Mhm.
convert. Wait, what choice is it? Convert or die? What kind of choice is that ultimately, right?
Mhm.
So when we're
Yeah.
thinking about the use of religion as a tool to get people to do what you want to do, in that sense, we cover slavery, genocide, the expansion throughout the, the territory of the what's now the United States.
Yes, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because I
Yeah,
know that maybe one of the things we wanted to cover was this idea of manifest destiny, right? And though there's a definition that's popping up for everyone that's watching this. And so it's this cultural belief, right? That there's a destiny in the spread of things across the entire North American continent. And in zombie history, we're always talking about the US. I think there's like the history of colonization is much bigger, right?
sure.
But I think that this expansion is a really interesting thing to cover when we're thinking about it being done in the name of both colonization and religious belief. Is that right,
That's right.
Mzilikazi?
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, I mean, just think about the ways in which the United States has been historically presented, and even to colonists, right, as a
Yeah.
wide, empty expanse, right?
Absolutely.
Empty being the operative word, as though there weren't many peoples,
Mhm.
communities, ethnicities, and languages that were spoken all throughout this land. But
Mhm.
you're right, Liz, to really highlight the role of manifest destiny. This somehow that God has given the colonists the power, and say not just the power, but nay, the duty to expand westbound, right?
Mhm.
To expand. So even you see that depicted in art, right? This expansion
Mhm.
of the colonists to the west. Okay.
I know I had to bring this up. John Gass had this American Progress painting, and we could critique the heck out of this, right, Dr. Kone?
We sure could. I mean, even if we just look at the top part here, right? I mean, this floating figure is quite literally like an angel floating, right? And who's following? We see here at the bottom a colonist, right, representing the expansion. We also see to the left of this painting, we see native folks, indigenous people, and you see that they are running, right? So this
Mhm.
expansion, as though it was divined by God. And yet we do see, it even fights the mythology that somehow the land was empty when we see people fleeing
Being
the colonists.
displaced, yeah,
That's
and
right.
I think what one of the things is, I mean, this entire left-hand side of the painting is so heartbreaking. You see the buffalo also fleeing,
That's right.
right? Yeah, just being displaced by people moving inward, and I think it's really important too that the lady, however you interpret her, is actually holding a school book, right?
Hmm.
So it's this
Hmm.
progress of we're going to be teaching, right? We have this mission. We're going with a mission,
That's
and in the
right.
meantime, we're going to be displacing folks. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we have some people that are commenting. So Jason did rightly point out that she's also carrying the 12th telegraph wire. So there's like progress here as well. Technological
Hmm.
progress is also one of the things that's
That's
being
right.
taken into.
And I hadn't noticed before, Liz, on the left side of that painting, it's
Yeah.
dark, right? It's dark on the,
Mhm.
and then progress is somehow bringing some sort of light with them, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's this idea, right? Is progress comes and brings some light, but what's displaced? And of
Mhm.
course, the question is it truly bringing progress?
Mhm.
Okay. So a lot there.
Absolutely a lot there. And I'll bring in a comment as well as I know that we all thank you, Jason. I have to say bringing lightness into the dark, right? Like that's the mission.
Hmm.
So we've talked a little bit about the there's this many people feel that they're atheists because they feel like religion is a tool for tyranny, and I wanted to bring this point up from Pam right before we kind of move into our next segment, which might cover some of the positive messages, right? But what do you think? Is it a tool for tyranny? Like, is that what we're discussing?
Well, I mean, it certainly has been used as a tool for tyranny, right?
Hmm.
We think about the Crusades, or we think about any of these religious wars. Um, we don't have to go to the Crusades. We don't have to go to the Crusades.
Hmm.
Remember, just a few years ago, the quote unquote Muslim ban within the U.S. in terms of U.S. policy. So we could
Hmm.
go further back, and the wars that are conducted in the name of religion, religious expansion, or truth, or modernity, whatever, or
Hmm.
the current um, continued conflicts around religion. But the thing is,
Hmm.
that's true, but it's not the only truth. I'm constantly reminded that
Exactly.
even though religion has been used as a tool of tyranny, right?
Hmm.
Religion has also been used as a tool for justice. We might
Mhm.
consider liberation theology, or those folks who have grounded themselves within particular Catholicism, to consider it, how could it be used to liberate people through these teachings? I mean, truly, the teachings haven't, I mean, I don't know. The teachings of Jesus, do you read into them and you see colonization, right? Or do you see love, right? And I
Mhm.
think everybody who reads into it clearly uh, read something different, and everybody who uses it as a tool
Yeah.
also uses it as a different kind of tool.
Exactly. It's interpretation. It's a tool. I'll bring in a couple of things, but I'll say thank you so much for that, Mzilikazi. I learned so much from you all the time. Thank
Oh,
you,
it's
dear
mutual.
colleague and
It's super
friend.
mutual.
And I'm reminded of, the comfort that I took growing up Catholic, and there were these rebellious Catholic priests, right, who decided to go off script, right, off of
Sure.
the script, right, to preach actual forgiveness, which
Or rebellious nuns. I mean, consider the
is
hierarchy around gender within the Catholic Church, and that you
yes.
had rebellious nuns who were
Mhm.
um, pushing different messages, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's always folks within these kind of tools that have a more liberatory
Mhm.
and therefore considered more radical, but a more liberatory view.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
have to bring in this comment because this is exactly it. Athena, thank you. What about the Quakers? Exactly. Liberatory view, right?
that's right.
Yeah, maybe we can bring this comment back up as well. But there's just a couple of cool comments I want to bring in. Thank you so much for all of your comments about the painting. Maybe we'll get back to it. But Dave has this question: aren't these religious movements originally about pushing back against the people in power? Um,
Well, yeah, which is why it's so interesting to see the way they were used, right?
yep.
Let's not forget the teachings of Jesus about what the
Mhm.
bankers, right? And about what
Mhm.
is it easier for a camel to enter, what is it, through a, what is it, the
Eye of
needle?
a
You know
needle.
this one? The eye
Eye
of the
of a
needle than a
needle.
rich person, right?
Mhm.
So the critiques remain, whether or not people have chosen to see them. But the thing about that, which is a great question and example, is the ways in which these faiths have been co-opted by the state or other the state in terms of political power. But you could think of the role of the church as having had historical and contemporary political power, is it
Mhm.
not? Right?
Mhm.
So yes, originally it's been about pushing back, but many times those things can be co-opted and used against the same people it was originally intended to liberate.
Thank you. And
Right?
I'm just bringing up some of these comments as you're talking, Ms. Olakazi, because I think that this is the conversation we want to be having today, right?
That's right. And
And
even zombified by the racialization of Jesus. Right?
yes.
This idea, if you walk into someone's home and you see an image that you recognize as Jesus, which is what a painting of an Italian person, right?
Mhm.
For how long ago? As compared with where Jesus was historically originated, right? As a
Yeah.
Middle Eastern, brown skinned, woolly haired person,
Mhm.
right? So even the zombification of the idea of Jesus changes over time to be in line with social, cultural, racial,
Mhm.
gender hierarchies.
Mhm. And so I feel like this is what we're talking about when we say the zombie Jesus, right? Is how we are zombified by the image of Jesus. And I want to say, so that, that image has been used to subject and oppress, but also to promote and spread messages of love and forgiveness, right? So I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more today. But I think maybe now is the time to bring on our guest and have a conversation.
Let's do that. It's
Cool.
due. You know what? And as we do, if you are watching today, wherever you are in Zombielandia, go ahead and hit that like button, right? Hit it like you
Mhm.
like those Easter peeps, right? Hit that or subscribe to the channel so that you are always ready to engage with some zombie information, of course, defense while you're out there in these streets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please subscribe. We're continuously talking about how to survive and thrive.
That's right. That's right.
Thrive
That's
as well.
right.
So
Well, I'm super excited for our guest today. I am just I'm over the moon, really. We have Dr. Tiffany J. Bell, who's joining us today, who's a professor of communications from Valparaiso University. Uh, Tiffany is a researcher, scholar, activist, and more so, I call her a dear friend who we went to school. I went to college together almost. Gosh, should we date ourselves? We'll just say we've been friends for a long time. We've been
I
friends
like
for a
that.
very long time. There we go.
I like that. And you know what? I got my peeps right
Do
here.
you?
Yes, this is my favorite Easter candy. So shout out to the peeps.
I
That's
love that.
wonderful.
We have a
That's
little bit of a,
wonderful.
we have a little bit of a, we have a dissenter here. We're a like I'm a peeps person too, so like Taylor, so sorry, this is the peeps stream today. Please don't take back your like, but Dr.
Well,
Bell, what
we
is
could have talked about the candy corn instead, but we didn't.
we
We went
could
to the
have,
peeps,
we
right?
we'll
There's
save that for Halloween. Yeah.
well,
Dr. Bell, it's
it
so awesome to have you
right.
here. Sorry, Ms.
I'm so
Lakazi.
excited. Oh no, I think we're just both so excited
I
and
know, I think
overjoyed to have you join us. So hop right in here. I mean, you bring in so much different work and research than we do, right? As a communications scholar and your lived experience, right? So let's just start here. Is Jesus a zombie?
So I've been thinking about it, and my answer is no, not Jesus himself. So when we think about this concept of what Jesus is and what Jesus represents, I think that and people on the line were actually saying this. Jesus was part of a group of people who were not part of the hegemony, right? This is an individual who came from a carpenter. This is a person who was not part of the individuals that actually had power. And then the other thing, when we're thinking about this concept of zombies, and I had to really think about it, right? The reason why I would say that Jesus wouldn't be a zombie is because Jesus, in a sense, when we think about what it means to be human, right? So even though he might have lived a human life and people know that there's a human Jesus, when I think about an individual who was a human, that means that they would have to have come from a man and a woman, right? That kind of reciprocity between the man and the woman to create another human, or what we call that biologically, right? And that's what that idea. But when we think about the concept of Jesus, especially from the Judeo-Christian standpoint, how was Jesus made? God and a woman. Man didn't have nothing to do with it, right? That's what Sojourner Truth said. So because of that, I would say that Jesus himself is not a zombie as the entity.
Well, we have some people that are just so excited and agreeing with you. I'll bring in Emily's, and Emily is our undead expert. In her opinion, Jesus is neither a zombie nor undead in any capacity.
Yeah.
Right.
And I like that undead because I was thinking about the way in which Jesus gets people to critically think. We're having this conversation right now. We're here pontificating on what religion has done, and it's getting us to, and it can get us to critically think and think about the world in different ways, right? It captures people at their very values. Now, we might not agree with those values, right? And we can get into the zombification of things, but Jesus was a thinking person. I mean, 90 years later is when the Bible was actually written. People who probably never even encountered this human as a human and that was allegedly resurrected, and they're still writing about them. That has something to say about how powerful that entity, person, or whatever we want to call Jesus is to get individuals to move towards particular things. And it was so powerful. Like the idea of Jesus, we know throughout any religion, is so powerful. So because of that, I say no, Jesus is not a zombie.
I love that. You're making me want to go back and re-celebrate Easter, actually, I think, right? I've been doing it wrong the whole time.
It's interesting. I'm riveted as well, so if Jesus isn't a zombie, right, could, and I've tried to lay out this idea of being zombified by the idea of Jesus, of not Jesus himself, right? Because we've seen in the comments, even just recently, right, that Jesus himself was a rebel, was he not? Right? Mm-hmm. The ideas that he shared, the people that he spent time with, right? Mm-hmm. The poor, sex workers, like washing the feet of the people who were pushed to the margins, right? So mm-hmm. Jesus himself seems to me to be very radical. But then we think about the ways in which Jesus has been used as a tool to zombify. To zombify mm-hmm. others. So what do you think about that? Do you think, or let me ask you this: what has been done in the name of zombie Jesus? Now, I don't mean zombie if Jesus is not a zombie, but zombie Jesus, the zombified by the idea
I think that's an excellent question. So I would say yes to that, right? So what Jesus does, and you alluded to this before. So we're thinking about people, how we can make change. We're also thinking about what sets people apart, what makes people do the things that they do. That is at the very heart of that is someone's value, right? And so this zombified Jesus, zombified religion is getting at these individuals' value system. And it's extremely hard to change an individual's zombie system. So let me give you one of my favorite examples when we're thinking about how people can create change, why people think the way that they do. All right. So, for example, once there was this anthropologist, and this anthropologist says, you can't eat turtles anymore because they're going to be extinct, right? So we don't want you eating turtles anymore because we want to save the land. We think that this is super important. These turtles add a lot of value to our land. We want to preserve Mother Earth. This is why we don't want you to eat the turtles, right? And sometimes maybe the turtles could even be poisonous. Let's go ahead and throw that in there, okay? Maybe we want to save the land and the turtles can be poisonous. It's bad for you. If you're eating turtles, it's not necessarily healthy. And mind you, this is just all made up. I'm not saying that turtles are good or bad here, but here's just a for instance. However, if I tell you something like, if you eat the turtles, God will not like it. You will, you're not going to be able to go to heaven. You are not a good person if you eat turtles. That statement in itself speaks to when we think about this idea of the influence of individuals' values, about what they see as good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. And that's when we think about the zombification of Jesus, that is at the heart of what is happening here, right? We're getting at individuals' value systems, because often we know that the interpretation of the Bible is seen through different cultural lenses. Jesus is seen in different cultural lessons through different religions. And because of those values, people can be zombified, right? And it's like, when you talked about that manifest destiny originally, that is a zombification of taking this idea of what Jesus is, what religion is, and saying it is our destiny. If we say that it is your destiny versus it might be good to look at this land, then we have these ideas that we are a privileged people. We are a people who are entitled to this. And it doesn't matter, right? It's that hierarchy. It doesn't matter if we're stealing the land from other people. It's God told us to do it. And because God told us to do it, we know that it's right. And because of that, God told us to do it in the name of religion. Let's think about, in the name of Jesus, how many times have people done those things? And we will go along with it. And we see it with even in how we grow up. We see that God says that this is wrong. Like our parents, if you grew up in a religious home, your parents will say, honor your mother and father. God told you to do that. Jesus, because that's what Jesus did. And using those things as a bit of controlling how humans should or should not behave. Right. And so within that concept, I guess we can say the larger idea is, there we go.
Dr. Bell, I could just listen to you talk and talk and talk. I tell you, my mind is just like firing at all these ideas that you are speaking to. I'm really thinking about, how you ended here, thinking about the role of Jesus and zombification as a way of controlling, right? Way of controlling the mass, with that excellent example of the turtles here. My mind keeps going between the role of religion to control, and yet Jesus, the figure, was so rebellious.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like Jesus, the figure, I'm not a religious scholar, but the figure that, my experience in living in religious school seems so rebellious. How do we align the figure of Jesus, who's not only rebellious, supports the marginalized, supports the poor? I mean, that idea of rebel Jesus with zombified Jesus, with the Jesus that gets you to, love your parents or controls you, gets you to fall in line.
I love that. And I love the comment right here. So what I'm going to say with everything is they're not binary, right? They're not mutually exclusive. They can be and both. Meaning is found in people. So I'm a communication scholar. I am not a religious scholar. Okay. I did not go to school to look at that. But what I did look at is this notion of social construction, but also this idea that we are not binary. There's this intersectionality, because I think you're getting at that. He can be and both, right? Because humans, zombies, higher entities are more than just one thing to one people, depending on where you are put. So I think that it's interesting for us to, instead of saying this is what something is, but to think about the intersectionality and how that intersectionality of Jesus works within the context of our life. Whether Jesus can be used to help. And I would hope that, because I actually work at a Lutheran institution, and we have this kind of Lutheran ethos that, don't forget, the poor will always be with you. These actually good ideas that, people, that when you think about that with humanity and how humanity can grow and develop, those are great things. So looking at Jesus in that way within the context of intersectionality is going to bring us to a better, I guess, idea of how these things work versus just kind of that binary. I guess that's the best way I can answer the question.
And that intersectionality, really, for those who haven't heard that term before, intersectionality is like what? It's like you could be more than one thing at the same time, right? It's like this. Can you describe it, Tiff?
Yeah. So I always like to look at intersectionality as what makes a person uniquely who they are, right? So for example, you are not just a Black person, you are a Black woman, right?
That's right.
You are not only just that, you are actually a PhD. You live in California. I live in Chicago. All of these things, all of these identities, our body, we talk about the body of Christ, right? Our identity, the way in which we look, the way in which we represent ourselves is also a part of intersectionality, because people are going to communicate with us in a different way. The best analogy and the simplest analogy when I think about intersectionality is a cake. What do you need to make a cake? All right, so you might need some eggs. I'm not a baker, so I'm throwing stuff out here. You might need some eggs. You might need some flour. You probably need some milk. You probably need some additional flavoring, right, to make that specific cake. But if you add, and maybe baking soda, baking powder, if you add or take away, that cake, in fact, is going to be different. Even though it is a cake, it is going to be different. And I think the thing about intersectionality is not additive. This person, or if you're considered a zombie, you're a zombie because you're this. No, it's this all things combined when we're thinking about the context of intersectionality. It's, you can't talk about religion if you're not talking about race. You can't talk about, the internet if you can't talk about where the person's positionality is. So when we're thinking about all of those particular identities, and you were talking about how Jesus had these different identities. Some might say that Jesus would be an individual who was trying to control. We think about individuals, but also this individual who is helping to spread love, peace, and joy, and both of those things. So the intersectionality is allowing individuals to be fully themselves and not say, you know what, Z, since you're a Black woman that went to Indiana University, and Tiffany, since you're a mixed race Black woman who went to Indiana University, you must be the same person, or you must think in the same way. And we know that even though we both have PhDs, we are both considering ourselves Black women. I'm a much lighter mixed race Black woman. Our experiences are different, and we can't be judged as the same person, even though we might have the same education. People may in fact classify us as the same race, right? But we have to allow individuals to be uniquely who they are within the context of intersectionality. So I hope that's a good definition. But Z, will you give your definition, what you think it is, as far as intersectionality, if I've missed anything?
No, I think you did. That was great.
That's amazing.
I mean, that's amazing. I think really just recognizing that we are more than one thing at one time. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that really gets at intersectionality, particularly when we're covering identity and beliefs and so forth. So that's really useful when we think about this idea here. Right. So I want to move us towards thinking about our final question here. On zombie history, we're really always getting back to this question. Is a concept of resistance, right? And really often that can be resistance to the status quo, or the way that things have been done. And we, on today's episode, and talking about zombie Jesus, is Jesus a zombie or being zombified by Jesus, right? And in that sense, being co-opted, or having Jesus' teachings being co-opted by the church, or the ways in which it's used to control. So I'm really thinking on both of those sides there, and I'm still thinking to how we even got to discussion of intersectionality. Jesus himself as rebellious to the state, and then the co-option of Jesus as part of as to be used by the state here. So I'm thinking about resistance here, Dr. Bell. Can you we want to challenge folks to think about, well, do we have to be like the idea of zombified Jesus, or not? How do we take into account this idea of being zombified by Jesus, and what to do with that, right? Right. And as you recall, you said it could be both things. Like Jesus can be used and co-opted by the state, while at the same time we can recognize that Jesus's figure or role as a rebellious spirit and leader.
Mm-hmm.
So where does that leave us today?
I am so excited to hear your answer, Dr. Bell, right? Because it's like, what methods do we have to resist the bad zombie Jesus, or like the Jesus that is the zombie, and think about the Jesus that we've been discussing here, right? Or like the concept of love and forgiveness as resistance. That would be that. I'm so excited to hear.
Okay, so thank you for the question. I love that. One thing that we can do is we have the ability to critically think about our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Mm-hmm. And because I am a communication scholar, I'm going to say one thing: media literacy. So the great thing about the internet, and so my work actually focused on what's the difference between participation and empowerment on the internet, and how participation works. But I think that we should think about what messages are we getting, who is giving us this message, and we can take in this information, but not looking at it as if it is, here's what the gospel is, and thinking outside of ourselves. A lot of scholars now, and a lot of research looks at the fact that, and you all mentioned like when we think about how does the internet impact us, how does the internet make us zombies? Because now a lot of our thinking is kind of like along those kind of same lines. So I would say that it's important for us to get a diverse amount of information when we're thinking about that, so we can think and create new things, because we're different. That's the beautiful thing about humans, right? We have the ability to think outside of things, not because one scholar says something or another, but how does that happen? And I think that's truly where we can make social change, where we're allowing different voices at the table, but really having that really discourse, like the discourse that we're having now. Like, we come from different standpoints. Kind of that idea of the coffee house is super important. So I think that that is really important. And then the other thing that is super important when we're thinking about media literacy is empathy. And one thing that Jesus taught us is empathy, right? Placing yourself in another person's shoes, right? I think essentially as humans, we all want that faith, love, hope, all those things that Jesus were talking about. And just because an individual looks different than you, doesn't necessarily have the same political ideologies, I think that we need to place ourselves in understanding, well, why would that person think or have those values and beliefs the way that they do, right? How can we do that so we can make those changes? Because understanding the world outside of yourself, because it's hard, right? I see the world as who I am, but how can I have empathy and step outside of that and say, this is how we can make changes. This is how social change can happen. This is how the positive can happen when we're leading with a kind of empathy. And I know, unfortunately, with technology, we're kind of in that crisis because of the veil of communication, right? Like, you can capture me, but you can't capture me in the same way that if we were sitting in the same room, right? So media literacy and empathizing where an individual comes from, and avoid that kind of attack. Like, okay, let's have this conversation. And that's what I think Jesus what we were talking about was really getting at. Jesus was with people who wouldn't necessarily, he was not part of the group of in power. He talked to all different types. He understood others based on, and himself based on others, right? And that's essentially what will bring humanity forth. I mean, hopefully we can get out of this apocalypse. I don't know. I mean, I hope so, but what can I say? So that's what, I guess those are my ending thoughts as far as like zombified Jesus.
That's great. Super engaging and thoughtful points there that I will be taking with me as I think after this really unique weekend, and to be think about what now. I think that media literacy is a huge takeaway. Huge, right? When you have so much media available to you, how do you find out what's the right way and what to take in and how to take it in, especially now? So I'm really grateful for connecting that to these ideas of empathy, right? And to these ideas of love and the real radicalness that was modeled in Jesus's teachings.
And I'm just so excited to go forward and lead with empathy. And I think that, the people watching today, Dr. Bell, just thank you for being here, right? As I'm seeing the comments roll in, people are so excited to hear a conversation that has a realistic and positive approach to these issues. So I'm feeling that energy today. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for
so
being
much,
here, Dr. Bell.
Awesome. Well, that was so exciting. What an exciting conversation. Wow. Well, everyone, listen, next week, you got to tune in to Channel Z's final episode of the season, the final retrospective, where we come back and we ask really important questions like, will we be surviving the apocalypse over break? Will you, will I, will we, or not? And maybe some strategies on how to do that. So plan that in your calendars for next week, y'all.
Make sure you subscribe, ring that bell so that you get notifications when we're going live.
That's right. Like and subscribe. Wow. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you next time, the season finale, and of course, next time on Zombie History. But of course, until then, y'all, don't be a zombie. Know your history. Take care, y'all.
I know it's crazy, but it seems so logical. I can't deny that there is something supernatural with you.